Next question is from Ozzy. Ozzy's asking, actually something I've been curious about and perhaps advanced question. We have a lot more information in the work step found in debug for submit time render engine wait time. Could you explain what exactly these mean, or when should be useful to read those metrics? I mean, I can kind of go through it. Wonder if I should move the camera. Let me do this. The camera to manual, and I will move it here. And then I'll make it render private UI, so you can like, let's see, render private UI, there we go. So you can see my dash, and I'll move this out of the way. And let's open the debug worlds. So we have a few things there. It's actually kind of hard because I can't see it like over the camera. So you got a frame rate, that's pretty much, you know, your frame rate. You got the engine update time, that's sort of like the how long it takes for the engine to update like total, but it also doesn't mean like all of this time is processing. Some of this time might be, you know, waiting on the renderer to do its stuff. It's just measuring how long it takes between like each tick of the engine, you know, to do things. Then you got render time. This one only works when you're in VR because this one you actually take directly from Unity, and this indicates how long it took Unity to actually render the scene, but Unity only reports this in VR. It doesn't report it in desktop, so in desktop this is not gonna show anything. Then you got engine frame start wait time. This is actually on the Froox engine side, when it finishes all its work and it's like, okay, I can start another update, it actually needs to wait for the renderer to be like, okay, like I'm ready for another frame, and here's also like, you know, new input data. This is how long it's waiting for, you know, Unity, the renderer, to tell it like, you know, I'm ready to start. So this essentially, Froox engine is not doing anything like synchronous, like it still might be doing background jobs, but it's essentially just waiting for the renderer to tell it like, you know, it's ready. And usually this will be high if you're more rendering constrained. So like if the Froox engine processing is too fast, then, you know, it essentially has to wait on the renderer to be like, you know, ready for another frame. And you can also see how many bytes, I've kind of added like when I was debugging specific thing, you can see when the renderer sends a message saying, okay, I'm ready for a new frame, it sends stuff like, you know, the inputs and like lots of other stuff like that it measures. And this is the size of the message in bytes, how much that big, how big that is. And it's like, you know, serialized message. Then you have engine start to submit time. This is actually when the engine starts like a new update tick. To how long, you know, how long the engine actually takes in actual processing to submit a new frame. So this is like, you know, the engine, it got like that the render is ready for a new frame, it starts doing its processing, you know, updates everything, updates all the worlds, and then generates a new frame update, and then submits it to the renderer, and then it's, you know, done with like that job. It still does some work afterwards, but it's not measured here. This is like literally how long it takes from the renderer being, I'm ready for a new frame, here's the new input data, for the engine to submit a new frame. And you can actually see this like, you know, it's around, tends to hover around like 8, 9, 10 milliseconds. So the like, if the renderer like, you know, was if I was not rendering anything, I would get like around like 100 frames, 100 FPS. Then you also get a render start to submit time. This is kind of similar-ish thing, but it's measured from the render side, so it tends to be similar value to this one, but usually it'll be slightly higher. This is actually the renderer when the renderer starts a new tick. It gets, you know, all the input data and tells Froox engine, I'm ready for a new frame, sends it over. Froox engine generates it, updates, and then this is how long it takes from the renderer starting its tick, telling the engine it's ready for a new frame, to receiving a new frame. So that's gonna be slightly higher because you have like, you know, you have like time that it takes for the Froox engine to communicate over IPC. The new frame is ready, and also like to process whatever the frame start information was. So this should generally be similar to this previous one, just slightly higher. And actually I used it like during the development process because this was too high, and I noticed like it was I tuned the IPC mechanism to like not have like a lot of overhead. Then we have frame process to next begin time. This is also coming from the render side. This is essentially when the render processes, it finishes processing, whatever frame data it was sent by the Froox engine, to when the next, essentially tick starts. And this includes any sort of rendering that like Unity does, and also like any Unity stuff, that comes after our engine updates. So like if there's any like, CVR, like, whatever scripts exist on Unity side, they will contribute to this time if they happen, before or after our update loop. Then I got asset integration time. This is specifically measuring. So on the render side, when the renderer sends a new, essentially says like, I'm ready for a new frame, here's input data, instead of doing nothing while it waits, it actually integrates assets. So like if there's any texture uploads, any material uploads, any mesh uploads, it'll be processing those. And this is actually one of the reasons like why loading is so fast now, is because all the time that Froox engine is computing your frame, the renderer will be uploading stuff to the GPU to like utilize that time. However, one thing to be cautious about this one is it doesn't this doesn't mean all its time was actually spent uploading assets, because if it doesn't have anything to upload, it'll just wait. Like it'll sleep until it receives something from like Froox engine, which it can, because like our asset uploading is actually multi-threaded and runs in background. So even if Froox engine is computing stuff, it can still be sending assets to upload to the renderer. So like that will like make it wake up and like some processing. But if you see like for example, if you see 10 milliseconds here, it might be like, it's possible if there's not too much upload, it'll maybe spend like 1 millisecond uploading the assets, and the 9 milliseconds it was just kind of sleeping, waiting on your frame. You also got particle extra time. We actually give particle systems a little extra time to process, to update. That way they actually run smoother. This technically lowers the overall frame rate a bit, like if it becomes too big, but it makes particle systems a little bit smoother, because for the normal asset processing, the moment like Froox engine is ready with a new frame, we stop asset like integration and we like do more of it next frame. But with particles, we don't want to wait, because it might include whatever was computed in that frame, so we give it a little extra time to process. And then you can actually see how many tasks were processed. These are like just generally tasks. You can also see how many times it waited on a handle. This is how many times the renderer has slept, when essentially it reached a point it was like, okay, I don't have anything more to process, I'm gonna sleep, and then I'm gonna like, if something comes, that's gonna wake it up. And this is actually kind of telling you how many times roughly it like woke up, during Froox engine computing, like a thing. And then you also get the remaining task. There's how many tasks were essentially left after it finished processing. So when it has a bunch of stuff to process, and then it receives a new frame, it essentially stops processing. This is how many tasks are left at the end of that. And you got like normal task, high priority task, render task, and particle tasks. And you can see there might be some normal remaining tasks. Generally high priority should be low, because it processes this with high priority. So usually you see the main tasks, particles, they're also 0, because like they have a little extra time, for processing. Then you also got frame update handle time. This is how long it takes on the render side to actually process the frame update that Froox engine generated. So that's essentially applying all the updates, for the state of the scene, for like rendering, how long they take to process. And then includes the updates themselves, and can also include stuff like, for example, you have reflection probes that render, or spherical harmonics that compute, that will contribute to this time. We also have shared memory managers, because we use shared memory to communicate between the processes, and there's like managers that like where systems can allocate blocks, but those blocks are allocated from memory managers, which allocate a bigger block, typically 16 megabytes, and they'll essentially allocate small chunks of that and then free them. You can see there's currently 4 in use. One of them is actually empty, because in use there's 3. It actually keeps like one reserved, just so it doesn't have to kind of keep allocating and deallocating them. It also tells you if it's pruning. If it detects there's too many unused ones, it starts pruning, where essentially it'll mark them, and if they're like unused for long enough, it'll just deallocate them and free up memory. And as you can see, it's currently using 42 megabytes. That's like used to communicate between the Froox engine and the renderer. There's how much free memory is, and capacity 64, which kind of works out because like there's 4 of them, and the minimum size is 16 megabytes. And they can be bigger if like something like a big assets are being uploaded, it allocates a bigger one, but the minimum size is 16 megabytes. And then I got like typical updates. This is like Froox engine side. This is actually how long it takes to update the world. The frame start is like how long it essentially waits on the render to be like, okay, I'm ready for another frame, you can start computing things. Then you got like a setup video, like this one's pre-existing. This is actually running in parallel, so like the audio update time, this is in background, because the audio system, it runs fully asynchronously from the main thread. So even like if everything freezes, all the main thread freezes, audio still works because it updates asynchronously. It's specifically designed that way because you don't want your audio to freeze. But this is how long each audio takes to process. You want to be careful with this time. If you like, I've seen some worlds where like audio would start like degrading, and the culprit was actually the world had like dozens of listeners, because each listener takes time to update. If this starts getting too big, like generally this should be under a millisecond, or if it starts getting say above 5 milliseconds, there's probably something wrong. You should like check like if you have like maybe too many listeners that shouldn't be active. You also get like how many samples are available. That's essentially how much the buffer has for playback. If this runs to 0, that's when you get clicks. That's like when it underruns, and you can actually have like count of the underruns as well. Let's see what else is there. This one, actually, I think this one's broken. I might need to fix this one. And then I got like individual word updates. There's the user space. There's like my local, and there's like this word, how long it takes to update. And these ones I think are also broken right now. I might need to fix those. So yep, that goes over this stuff. I'm gonna move the camera back now, and I will disable private UI, and I hope that answers the question. Hope it was like a good info. What would be like in the explanation? Like you asked for one. Okay. One thing I'm also gonna mention. Not all of those times they're like they're not like exclusive. Like they you cannot like add all of them together. That's not like how long things take. Like some of the timings there, they measure different time points. So like one of the times like can be say like if this is your timeline, and you've got like some events like here happens something, happens here, something happens here, something happens. Some of them will measure something like this, they will give you this time. Some of them will give you this time. So like some of the timings will actually include some of the other timings, because I've seen like some people kind of get confused by it, where they think it's all happening in sequence and you just sum all these together. That's not actually the case. It is for some of them, but not for all of them. So they might kind of confusing, because like if you add them together, like it would kind of work out that like you should have like a lot lower frame rate than you really have. Next question.